All right, testing 1, 2, 3. Let's see. I'm trying to get this thing going. Uh, it's not playing on any of my screens. One moment. If there's anybody there, please respond to this chat. I apologize for the errors. Let's see. Anyone there? Question mark. Give it a moment, folks. Okay, so it's working. Okay, perfect. Okay, welcome to the Encore edition of Story and Sketchwriting for Touhou Fanworks. This is an encore presentation of the panel that I did at TouhouFest 2023. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded, so this is going to be an encore presentation. So let's begin. Let's see. Hold on. It's been a long time since I streamed, so I have to get back into the swing of things, figure out how OBS works and all that. Okay. So anyway, if you're on this channel, you probably know who I am, but if you're just browsing through YouTube looking for videos on how to make Touhou works, well, I used to make various Walfist sketches, Touhou sketches. I have a Psychic Tribute show. I worked on numerous Halloween and Christmas videos for handing it off to other people in the Walfist station wagon. I did a pretty nifty Gensokyo Falls, a Gravity Falls type deal. Also made Down in the Rough. Oh, but I'm kind of on hiatus. I'm still around for tutoring and stuff. I also got a theater background, do stand-up comedy, and right now I'm doing research on narratology and narrative theory for layman usage. But let's jump right into it. This panel was made for all skill levels, for active creators and interested newcomers. It covers serious works, comedic works. It uses a 20-year tested method I developed back in my Gary's Mod days, the 5 steps to creating a fan work. We'll mainly be focusing on the first 3 steps. Feel free to note ideas as we go. You can use them for potential fan works. And if there's any time, we can have a Q&A. But because this is a stream, you can just ask me in the chat. And I don't think the link that I posted on social media is working, so please somebody post the updated link. Also, there are some Encore Edition slides. These slides were not in the original TouhouFest 2023 panel, but were added based on what people asked me at the convention, or it's additional info I'd like to clarify. And as always, what I like to do these days is I have an obligatory disclaimer. I do not know everything. Do not take what I say as gospel. Do not use it to tell other people they're wrong. I just like sharing ideas. At the end of the day, you got to find your own methods. Getting your tips from a single source can be a recipe for disaster. All right, so the 5 steps to creating a fan work. This doesn't just apply to Touhou, but it especially applies to Touhou because we've been given this amazing, detailed world that Zune has given us permission to do whatever we want with. The 5 steps are: 1, familiarize, know the series, know the existing works within that series. 2, create the ideas, what you're going to build your ideas out of later, the production later. Yo, AGS, good to see you again. 3, pre-production. This is the planning, the writing, the refining ideas. This is what we'll be spending most of our time in. And then finally, production and publication and reception. Even if you don't know the nuts and bolts, these 5 steps, the familiarize, brainstorm, pre-production, production, and publication, is all you need to know how to make a fan work. Here we go with part 1, familiarize, knowing what you want to make. Now, if you are a newcomer to this series and you want to know how to make Touhou Project stuff, or if you're new to another series, all you gotta do is study the canon. First, you start off with the games, the comics, the lore books. They can be found on Touhou Wiki. You can, again, read the wikis, fan compendiums. If you are in a Discord chat, you can communicate in your community's lore discussion chat. And most importantly, take everything with a grain of salt. Touhou's canon tends to be very loose and lax. So try not to cite canon because sometimes it will change at the drop of a hat. Study the fanon. Play the fan games. Here is Touhou Mother. This is one of the first major influences I got. Read the fan comics. Watch the fan videos. Read the fan fics. Study the memes and the running gags. Study the great works, the not so greats, and so on. And most importantly, again, take everything with a grain of salt. Or Satoru gonna go Will Smith on you. Keep that fishing rod out your mouth. And also study your motives. The top 5 reasons people create according to creative writing sciences are therapy and relaxation, creativity and exploration, social activity and camaraderie, gain and innovation and experimentation. You can have multiple reasons and none are inherently bad. I know in the past that I have said that it's never a good idea to only have one of these as your big reasons, especially gain, but if it motivates you, use it. We need all the motivation we can get these days. Let's see, and AJS in the chat says, yes, gotta love it when fans interpret things a certain way, and then suddenly Zunes shows up and says, nope, you were wrong about that all along. And plus, Zune tends to go with the sure why not attitude when it comes to canon versus fanon. So let's go deeper into the reasons. Reason number 1. Relaxation. Now, we're going to cover different reasons for what gets in the way, but these are the motivating factors. And I'd say these are kind of mental, where the other ones are more physical. We'll return to that later. But first, relaxation. I write because it's fun, relaxing, or helps me mentally and emotionally. When I did this live, I asked people to raise their hands, and about half the room raised their hands. The demotivator here is frustration. I don't like to write because it's boring, stressful, or tedious. Oh. And Ace Rena stuff says in response to the last one, that's why we love Zune. Okay. The do it anyway tip. Experience grows competence. Balance difficulty with skill to create the flow state. That is the flow state is when something is just difficult enough and just easy enough to put you in a state of relaxation. When you play the actual Touhou games themselves, and you're not thinking but feeling as you dodge your way through the Danmaku, that's the flow state. Bullet hell games are very good at getting into that. Creativity. All right, because I love coming up with new ideas. This one got a lot of hands raised at the convention. The demotivator. I don't like to write because none of my ideas turn out. The do it anyway tip. Experience grows competence, and competence defeats low confidence. Kind of a tongue twister. The do it anyway tip is, already did it. The feeling of I can't do it only goes away by fighting it. We'll dive more into this later. Then camaraderie. This is another big one. I write because I love sharing my ideas and connecting with fellow writers and fans. You love making things to connect with other people, and you love connecting with other writers and creators as well. The demotivator is social anxiety. I don't like to write because I'm afraid of criticism, letting people down, getting bullied, and so on. This is also one of many of our biggest weaknesses, including myself. The do it anyway tip, and these are things that I've learned only recently. Build healthy boundaries against toxic influences. Separate your self-worth from your abilities as a creator, and remember, you can't please everybody. In the words of an ultra marathon runner, you can walk on water for some people, and they'll just say, "Yep, you're only doing that because you can't swim." Let's see. Muscuba 39 says, "What if I can't come up with an idea?" We'll get into coming up with ideas in just a moment. There's a bazillion different ways to do that. The fourth one is gain. I write because I want to become popular, wield influence, and even get compensation. Now, when I asked people to raise their hand for this one, not many people did. But I'd say if it's a motivating factor, then use it. If you want to eventually speak at a convention and that motivates you, then use it. Plus, if the demotivator, I don't want to write because I don't want to waste my efforts. I might lose more than I gain. The do it anyway tip here is nothing is wasted if experience is gained. So again, if it motivates you, then use it. And then finally, innovation. I write because I want to push boundaries or try new methods or change how things are done. And this is another one of those smaller reasons why people create stuff, but it's still an important one to keep an eye out for. Let's see, AJS in the chat says, a lot of times idea crafting is just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Having friends bounce off does help too. And sometimes a movie or something might give you an idea. Yes, especially the throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. That is a very important part of creativity, which we'll go to in the next step, the brainstorm step. So anyway, the demotivator of innovation is imposter syndrome. I don't like to write because I don't feel like I have original ideas or works, or I don't feel like I'm going to contribute anything meaningful, to which I say, not everything needs to be groundbreaking or original. Make whatever you want, however you want, for whoever you want, you know, barring moral and ethical like boundaries and, of course, knowing your audience. Then finally, study your craft. You are here. Study what you want to make. If there's more you want to know about like video production or writing, script writing, and all that, there are books and guides out there pretty much everywhere. Join content creation communities. There's a couple for Touhou Fanworks. If any of you know about Kane's Create and Write, that's the one that I currently run. There's also some others out there like Keiki's Creator Haven. Let's see. Genso Chronicle, and there's another new one that just popped up. It's so new, I just forgot the name. I suck with names. And most importantly, you gotta practice. A bad work finish will give you more experience and a good idea stuck in your head. And now for part 2, brainstorming, collecting ideas to make something. This is the one I think that a lot of you are probably going to love since it's being talked about in the chat a lot. The first step is to gather as many ideas as possible for potential works, more ideas than you think you need. That is super important. Write down as many as you can. There are no bad ideas at this stage. They can be stashed away and you can come back and make them work later. If in your head you're busy thinking, oh, it would be a dumb idea if I were to make a racing game where Touhou characters ride on other Touhou characters, or, oh, I couldn't make a Touhou game with them just playing Mahjong. No, you can come back later and make it work. Some classic methods to coming up with ideas include the magic what if. You just ask what if blank, and you can add to character or wouldn't it be adjective, funny, sad, cool, if this happened. For example, what if Touhou was reimagined as an aquatic-themed magical girl series, which gave us the early 2010s Touhou fanfic hit Dolphin Rider Koishi? Or what if Gensokyo had a Manzai competition, giving us the Touhou M1 Grand Prix? Or what if Renosuke got possessed by a yokai and Reimu had to save him with the help of a pyromaniac Futo? And that gave us Genso Wanderer. Or you can get inspiration from passion. What makes you happy, sad, excited, scared, or angry? And just let that spark ideas. And if you feel the emotions from this idea, then most likely so will your audience. So, example here, what's sad? Deaths of canon human characters. That is a popular stock plot in a lot of Touhou fanfics. What's scary? The end of Gensokyo, which is another popular trope in Touhou fanfics. What's exciting? Rebuilding Gensokyo literally from scratch after a set apocalypse. The result? Concealed the conclusion. Do 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 do. Let me get a swig of water. Okay. Another way to come up with ideas is the trope list. This is recommended by Chris Beatty of National Novel Writing Month. All you gotta do is list your favorite plots, devices, characters, character traits, and then just use them in the plot. Then list all your least favorite things, and then avoid them like the plague. Visit TV Tropes for a great list of these, but remember, TV tropes will ruin your life. Character interview. Let's see. AJS says, Conceal the Conclusions OST still gives me feels after all these years. Yep, same. Okay, character interviews. If you know your cast well enough, you can just ask them how they think the story should go. You can ask them what they don't want to happen, like their biggest fears, and then you could totally use it. Or just their least favorite tropes, which then you can consider. As I said, once you have your ideas, you can go nuts. There are no bad ideas if you can make them work. If you want to make a Touhou soccer game, that has been done. Again, Touhou characters writing other Touhou characters racing game, done. Touhou characters in a dog park with their pet cows and owns and killer plants, you can do that. So once you've gathered a bazillion ideas, it's time to actually build them into something, and this is where we get into the meat of this presentation. The pre-production part, putting the ideas together. So this is the anatomy of a narrative work. This is based on the structuralist narratology. Which heavily influenced Japanese anime and manga. There's a weird history involving the Cold War, Disney, the French, And eventually it made its way over to Japan. It's a crazy story, but all you need to know is it's split between the story and the discourse. This model comes from Seymour Chapman from his book Story and Discourse. Story is the major and minor plot events, plus a story world, which is your settings and characters. And the discourse is the structure, the way it's put together, and the presentation, and in what way. Now, the fun thing about Fanworks is that they provide the story world, and you get to provide the plot, the structure, and the presentation. So first we are going to cover plots. Since this is a storytelling and writing thing, we're going to spend a lot of time here. Plot is divided by kernels, events that disrupt the story world, and satellites, events that illustrate the story world either through world building or showing the changes. If you know South Park, the creators said that stories are nothing but buts and ands. Think of your kernels as your buts, like yada yada yada, but then this happened, and satellites are the ands and so's. And yada yada, so yada yada, but, and that creates your story. So instead of looking at conflict, structuralist narratology looks at what is known as what's known as a disruption. It's anything that's out of the ordinary within a story world and requires no conflict or even a resolution to, let me start over. I'm stuttering, sorry. A disruption is anything out of the ordinary and requires no conflict or even a resolution. It's a source of storytelling power for slice life stories and is also useful for numerous gags, as we are about to see. The first story structure we will look at is good old Kisho Tenketsu. It's a story that's kind of taught like since kindergarten in Japan. It's super easy to understand. Key is the setup. Where, when, who, and what's going on. In this classic by Ao Usagi, we got Marisa introducing the setup, the who, the where, the what, the when, going, hey everyone, because it's April Fool's Day, I think we should play a trick on Reimu. Show is the elaboration. This is where we get more info on the setup. In the second panel, Marissa's going, hey Reimu, I think we should get married. And Reimu's going, oh really? I'm so happy. Then this leads to the 10, which is the turn. Other people call this the twist, but not like a surprise ending, oh, it was M. Night Shyamalan all along kind of a twist. This is something that contrasts the setup and the elaboration. Again, it is a disruption. You'll notice there's no conflict here. It's just Marissa's trying to say, Reimu, it was just a joke. Ugh. And Reimu's giving her those like lovey-dovey eyes. And this results in the ketsu, the end, the result. Now this could be the punchline or a double punchline if the turn was equally funny. So the key, the setup, Marissa wants to play a joke. The show, the joke is she wants to get married to Reimu. The 10, the twist, Reimu's giving her the lovey-dovey eyes. Marissa has a moment of weakness. And the ketsu, and so we got married. In short, it's key plus show times 10 equals ketsu, or setup plus elaboration times turn equals result. All right, and this wasn't in the original panel, but you can apply this to just about any four-panel comic. For example, from Life of Maid, we got Mei Ling making some instant ramen by the looks of it. The third panel, a long time has passed, and it turns out that she forgot to plug in the thing cooking it. Or this one, it shows Kaneko and Suwaku. Let's see, Kaneko's playing a game. It's like, oh, it's a game involving that snake guy. Suwaku says, oh, you only like him because it's snakes involved. The twist, Sonic's Solid Snake shooting a frog. Suwaku tackles Kaneko, what do you think you're doing? Or this classic from In Above the Earth and Moon. While the other bunnies are out pounding mochi, Raisin and Tay are out looking for things, searching for items. Now, the twist here is Raisin finds an autographed baseball. So now we know that they are going to find some out-of-the-ordinary items, and the result is Tay finds a landmine. It can also apply, the story structure can also apply to longer form stuff. This is a 7-panel comic, but you'll notice here, Yomu goes in looking for Yuyuko with Kaguya right here. That's our key. Our show is Yomu decides to run off. Our 10, it turns out Yuyuko is hiding all along. The Ketsu, Yomu catches her, and Yuyuko runs off with Kaguya's Kotatsu. See, Ace Arena says, stuff says, always blast when you do that Marissa voice. I always have fun doing it. Let's see. Okay, I was trying to think of another thing to say, so if you have any requests for me to say something in Marissa's voice, let me know. Okay, plot applied to sketch. In sketches, a singular or unusual thing can disrupt the status quo and sustain gags until a final button or tag. Now, this right here comes from Del Close. He's an improv teacher from Chicago, basically the father of Chicago-style improv. And first we start off with, the key would be your initiation, we get our base reality, and then we get the first unusual thing. That's the disruption. So once we disrupt our reality, then we ask, if that's true, what else is true? What else is true? And we can heighten the joke, keep going and going and going. AJS says, Master Spark solves everything, lives rent-free in my head. So a good example of this plot applied to sketch would be this MMD sketch, Toyosada Mimi no Miko, where she's a substitute. But then everyone starts getting her name wrong because it's Team 9 in the classroom. So they're like, oh, Toyosada Hatsune no Miku. No, no Vocaloid characters. No Tao characters either. The Michians are like, oh, Toyosada Mimi no Miko. No, go back earlier. Hi, everyone. I'm your substitute teacher. No, that's too early. And finally, it keeps building and building till they finally get Miko's name right. Then it's like, okay, now I can finally start the class. And then the bell rings. Bing, 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 bing. Now, how do you make disruptions in sketch comedy? Well, for that, we turn to the different theories of comedy. And there are three main ones. First, we got superiority theory that says that comedy takes the danger out of what scares us. We laugh at those above us to make them less threatening. We laugh at those below us to feel better about ourselves. And then, of course, we laugh at ourselves. This is the theory behind slapstick, creative roast, snobs versus slop plots, and so on. It explains the comedy behind everyone chasing Yomu for that test of courage. We got this episode of Life of Maid where Marisa eats their Halloween candy and then Reimu threatens Renosuke as the pumpkin Miko. Just remember, when using superiority theory, the punch up principle. It's easier and safer to punch up, laughing at the misfortune of the powerful, than it is to punch down, laughing at those who already have it hard enough. Example, Yomu getting helplessly chased, funny. Yomu realizing she has a sword and fighting back, funnier. Let's see. Naples Division says, I'm tempted to jokingly ask if a Sawako Christmas special is legitimate. I have weird ideas. Well, nothing's stopping you from making it, especially after watching this. Then we got tension theory of comedy that says comedy is a form of stress relief. It's especially a great source of nervous laughter. It's when something previously dangerous turns out to be harmless, or something harmless turns out to be dangerous. It's useful for suspense, playing with expectations. It's also a good source of comedy from misunderstandings or mistaken identity. The examples I used here, another In Above the Earth and Moon example, where they run in from the rain and Renosuke has an umbrella, turns out to be a shotgun. Or another one where the three fairies make Alice think they've come to assassinate her by accident. Meanwhile, Reimu is summoning a bunch of bullfinches for a ritual to weed out liars. They find the three fairies and crash through Alice's wall, Kool-Aid Man style. Then we got incongruity theory that says that comedy derives when we manage two things that shouldn't fit together, but they do fit together. Combining with tension theory, this creates benign violation theory. There's a great TED Talk that covers that more in depth. But basically, you play with one of four categories according to the humor theorist Arthur Ossenberger. You can play with language and meanings, like puns, wordplay, and misunderstandings. Playing with logic, comparison, contrasting, ignorance, exaggeration, absurdity, coincidence. Identity, exaggerating character traits, behaviors, and appearance. And playing with action, speeding up, slowing down, slapstick, and deformation. For example, the comedy play between Sakya, Mei Ling, and all the great characters of the Scarlet Devil Mansion, why they are so enduring is that they have so many great character traits to exaggerate. Let's see, the examples I used here. Yeah, I think that's probably why some of the, some Touhou characters are more easier to write for than others. But anyway, the example I used here is Marissa's telling Reimu about the three fairies living in a tree, and Reimu literally envisions them in a bird's nest. But then Marisa says, no, I mean they live inside the tree. And Reimu goes, wait, how are you reading my mind? Or another example here is we got the the deformation of this classical Walfus thing, and of course Lily White on a literal spring. Now, if you want to write long-form sketch comedy, let me have another drink real quick. Okay, if you're planning a long-form sketch comedy, this is the basic outline that I've used for a long time and have passed down to the people who basically took over sketching for me as far as Walfus stuff goes. They're made out of one-offs. These are standalone sketches that can fit anywhere. Runners that repeat across a compilation. They can tell a story, a narrative runner, or they repeat the same gag, a gag runner. Not to be confused with a running gag, which is a joke that reoccurs across multiple sketches, not just one. Callbacks, when you reference a gag from a previous sketch, typically used near the end. And stingers, which are usually saved after the credits for one more callback, one more running gag, or an extra punchline. The typical format of a long-form sketch video is an optional cold opening, intro, a runner. This can be a narrative or a gag runner. The random sketches, then another runner, then more sketches, then finally the runner part 3 with a final punchline, credits, then an optional post-credit stinger. Of course, you can play with this structure in a number of ways. For example, Seija frame. I think this is another one by Toddy, who, when somebody asked me what's one of my favorite, like, Touhou fan creators, it would definitely be Toddy and their MMD creations. It is a series of sketches in which Seija messes with Shimyomaru, and in the process, Seija gets injured. And, of course, every punchline ends with Shimyomaru shouting, Seija! Except for the one time when Seiga and Yoshika are together. Seiga says, oh, I'm going to take a nap, falls to the floor, and Yoshika's like, Seiga! Also, Harpoon Eats Fear and Loathing in Gensokyo is another sketch that involves an alternating series of narrative runners. So I'd recommend, again, looking up Seija, Frame, and Fear and Loathing in Gensokyo by Harpoon Neat. So that covers comedy structure. Now let's look a little deeper into the science of scenes. This is the Lebavian model of scene structure. It is made of technically 4 parts, but 6 if you count the entrance and exit. The abstract, that includes the context, the titles, and all that. Then you got the orientation, when, where, and who. Complication and disruptions, what happens. The evaluation, what's the response? There could be more than one. Sometimes the characters can only react. Let's see. Naples asks, can I do Kisho Kentetsu recursively? Make a longer plot by repeating that structure. Yes, you can. In fact, it is actually very common in long-form Japanese media to basically make the different parts out of it. In fact, one example that I would use, had it not been entirely a Touhou panel, would have been Your Name, which actually follows Kisho Tenketsu structure, which is why some people think that like the latter half of the movie seems to come out of left field. But I don't want to spoil it. I'd recommend just watching Your Name just because it's awesome. So anyway, let's see. So anyway, evaluation out of things. Can they react or can they do something? Even a strong reaction can justify a scene. Have you ever seen an anime where people eat something and all they do is have this overblown reaction? That's where this comes in. Then finally, the resolution. How does it turn out? And in the larger context, the coda. What was the point of that scene overall? Now, this I did not include. It's a diagnostic tool you can use to figure out where your storytelling is going right or going wrong. Between the orientation and the disruption, this is where you can find gags and dramatic surprises. Many 4Com and short gag videos rely on simply establishing a story world in the orientation and then disrupting it. If you ever heard of a sketch troupe called 5-Second Films, they run entirely on orienting the viewer and then disrupting that orientation. Or even going through the whole thing immediately. Like 7 Years Sauce and Luck. Orientation. Guys walking down the street. Complication. A black cat crosses his path. Supposed to be bad luck. Evaluation and reaction. He runs up and kicks it into the stratosphere, quite literally. Resolution. He's all psyched out while rock music plays. And all of this in 5 seconds. Between the complication and the disruption, this is where you can get good character reactions, scene turning points. And between the evaluation and the resolution, this is where you can find your endings, your climaxes, and setups for the next scene. So let's look at event structure in action. This is from a AJS says 5-second films is a masterclass in sketch comedy. Yep, if you want to know how to like tell as much story in as little time as possible, I would recommend watching 5-second films. So anyway, event structure. This is how that works in action using a Strange and Bright Nature Deity, Chapter 19. The abstract here would be the title page, The Terror of Monsters, Part 1, with the tagline, What Do You Fear?, featuring the 3 fairies on the cover. So we know it's about fear, it's about the 3 fairies, and it's about the terror of monsters. The orientation: shrine grounds, night, Reimu minding her own business, and what appears to be a small lost child. The disruption: turns out the child is a fair disguise as a Noperabo, which is a faceless yokai. The evaluation: Reimu is briefly surprised, only to anticlimatically kick her. This is also an example of the tension theory of comedy. She encounters and beats up 2 more Noperabo fairies, with increasing irritation and decreasing difficulty. The resolution and coda is Reimu walks off after having defeated the last of the fairies, completely irritated, setting up the next scene, fairy tree, same night, 3 fairies. Now, this whole entire scene is actually an orientation to the story as a whole, the equilibrium cycle. We'll go deeper into that in a second, but overall, orientation. The fairies are trying to prank Reimu and fail horribly. Disruption: Aya shows up and offers to help. Evaluation and result: Aya tricks Reimu into thinking that an unread newspaper yokai is infesting her shrine. New equilibrium: Reimu panic reads Aya's newspaper, and Aya and the fairies are victorious. Now, the equilibrium cycle comes from Tsvetan Todorov, a narratologist, and it's very similar to Kisho Tenketsu. It's very similar to the Labovian model, and it runs a little something like this. We start off with an equilibrium. We find out the where, when, and who of the story, the base world, the story world that we are later going to disrupt. For example, in Wild and Horned Hermit Chapter 33, the characters are pondering how they're going to prepare the next event's big meal, and this goal creates what is known as a narrative kernel. Now, all the other characters are going to have the goal to come up with special ingredients for the next meal. And the scenes that illustrate this are going to be the satellite scenes. The scenes that are basically the and so this happened, and so this happened. And I forgot to turn off my Discord notifications because there's Touhou 19 talk, so forgive that. So anyway, after we've established our equilibrium, we then hit it with a disruption. Something out of the ordinary happens to the story world. Sometimes we recognize the disruption, or we can hold that till later, and we have what are known as narrative enigmas that build up over time. The example here: the characters go out gathering ingredients. Reimu's visited by Yukari with her own special ingredients, which aren't revealed until later, creating another narrative enigma, while Kasen runs into Marisa along the border while she's gathering ingredients. We only find out later the story's disruption when Kasen reveals that she brought in an ocean fish from the outside world, meaning that she has breached the Hakari border. Finally, we get the results. Often there is an attempt to repair the disruption, fixing the effects. Now, things can either return to the status quo, or there can be a new status quo. But basically, this usually either climaxes the story or becomes a new super objective. The example here: at the big party, everyone begins questioning why Reimu is serving Yukari's special ingredient, which turns out to be unappetizing dandelions. But then Yukari reveals she knew all along that somebody breached the border. That's how she got the dandelions. This catches Kasen in the act and warns of a potential outbreak if not gotten rid of. You may also place the discovery and attempt to repair earlier, or reveal that the disruption was not what the characters thought. The misunderstanding creates the plot, and this results in the climax. In Wild and Horned Hermit Chapter 34, we're led to believe that Reimu was depressed, leading to the characters trying to motivate her, but then we find out that Reimu was actually just tired from reading a bunch of mystery novels all night. This results in a climax of Marisa bringing over a bunch of poisoned food. Actually, no, the poison was cooked out. But wait, that's a salad. I cooked it out of a salad. And Sumi Reiko parking a freaking UFO on Reimu's front lawn. Come on, Reimu, let's go make first contact. It's been a while since I've done the Sumi Reiko voice. Okay, Now, it's called the equilibrium cycle because there's usually an end depicting a new equilibrium, or at least a return to a status quo, which is typical of an episodic series. So for our Chapter 34 example, the dandelions are sold off as a health food to the human village and a delicacy among the yokai. Meanwhile, Kassen, as typical of many Wild and Horned Hermit episodes, is left powerless once again in an ever-changing Gensokyo. But of course, not every equilibrium has to return to the status quo. Sometimes it could change, or it can become, in a longer story, a kernel event to a new rule to a larger change in the story world. So basically, you're setting up the next story. The example here, going back to Strange Bright Nature Deity, the new equilibrium here has the fairy successfully pranking Reimu, who is forcing Marisa to help lay Aya's newspaper's spirits to rest. Now, of course, your kernel scenes aren't everything. The satellite scenes showing what the characters do in reaction to these changes are just as important. This creates some of the best gags and memes, like from the Chapter 33, the "Don't do drugs! Are you sure you haven't had too many mushrooms?" and the iconic "Yuck" from Remilia. Or this old classic where Costin asks, "Would you even recognize the scent of blood? You know, I've seen my share of bloodshed in my time. I know what a battlefield smells like, thank you very much." And of course, the poison food medley from Marisa. And that reaction from Reimu. Okay, stop there. All right, let me have a quick swig of water, and then we will continue. When I did this live, I had a full night's rest, and it was still early in the morning, but now it's like late at night and dry-mouthed and everything. Okay, emplotments. These are your common patterns of disruptions, and also a common pattern of plot kernels. And there are 6 basic ones. I think, let's see. There's a book, The 7 Basic Plots, but one of them is kind of redundant, so these are the 6 main ones you need to know. You got your one-way shifts, which are typically used for scenes, sketches, and also applicable to long character arcs. Things either go from bad to good, or things go from good to bad. You got your two-way shifts, which are typical of episodic plots. You got the Man in a Hole plot, named after Kurt Vonnegut, who said the shapes of stories fell into one of these categories. In the last example, that would have been everyone else's plot, or an Icarus plot, Costin's plot in the last example. TVA says, Sumireko, buckets are fed, so go fetch a bucket. Hashtag bucket. Okay, and three-way shifts. These are typically used of long-form narratives, like your standard comedy plot, such as Sid Field's 3-Act Paradigm, we'll cover that in a second, and the standard tragedy plot. Now, this was not in the TouhouFest examples, though, so here's what emplotment looks like visually. If we were to take Wild and Horned Hermit Chapter 33 and put it on a graph, this is what it would look like. You'll see that everyone else's fortune goes down, but then it jumps back up at the ending. Meanwhile, Costin's fortune jumps up in the middle, but then goes down at the ending. Or in the Strange Bright Nature Deity example, this is what's also known as an hourglass plot, where one character's fortune goes from good to bad, in this case Reimu, and another character's goes from bad to good, in this case the three fairies and Aya. Now, not all plots need to be symmetrical, since a lot of people at TouhouCon actually, gave me some kudos for this one. Let's look at this example with 3 intersecting plots. For example, I probably don't need to introduce this, so you'll probably know what it is once I start listing it. You have one story that has a man in a hole plot, such as a character accidentally causing a major disaster in Gensokyo, but then manages to escape. A classic tragedy plot, Gensokyo tries to prevent a realm-wide disaster, and despite a brief glimmer of hope, they not only fail, but events are soon to repeat. And a one-way negative shift. A character starts idealistic and ends nihilistically. And finally, what about 3-act structure? Well, as mentioned on the emplotment slide, this would be a 4-shift classic comedy or a 4-shift classic tragedy, following Sid Field's classic 4-kernel paradigm. For example, Act 1, we can go from positive, then Act 2A, negative, then positive, and then negative again to create a tragedy, or negative, positive, negative, positive. And again, this is compatible with Kisho Tenketsu. It makes it popular among Japanese screenwriters. A number of anime episodes and even can use this, even minimalist slice of life ones. let's see. This is not a Touhou example, but I think it's a great example of this same structure. There's an episode of K-On! Called Winter Days, which has very little dialogue, very little happening. Yet it follows this exact structure perfectly, and it's actually a compelling story. I would suggest looking that up. Just seeing how little you can get away with story and still telling, like, how little you can get away with showing stuff and still tell a story is what I'm getting at. Okay, now I'm only going to cover this one briefly. If you're still having trouble figuring out disruptions, there are 4 common ones, according to narratologist Claude Bremen. There's a chance to gain, character wants something positive. Keeping a gain, holding on to something positive. Avoiding a negative, they want to avoid something negative. Or losing a negative, removing a negative state. In the previous examples, Kasen wants to stand out with a rare fish dish, a chance to gain. Yukari wants to protect Gensokyo, avoiding a negative. Or, everyone wants to get rid of Reimu's depression, losing a negative. Reimu wants everyone to back off after a night of binge reading, losing a negative. A perfect setup for misunderstanding. And then finally, the fairies and Aya want to prank Reimu, a chance for gain. Let's put these together for the Wild and Horned Hermit Chapter 23. This is an Icarus plot going from a chance to gain to removing a loss. After a mysterious encounter, Reimu concocts a scheme to make money off her supernatural abilities. And then Reimu makes a killing off her fortune-telling scheme as Madame Gensokyo. But then the yokai take over her shrine in her absence, leading to this great reaction. You can't take over my shrine! Oh, my business was making a killing! And then finally, methods of plot and sketch outlining. You got the traditional snowflake method, where you just write the premise in a single sentence. Then you describe how you get the story from point A to point B. Then you break that down into acts, break that down into sequences and scenes, and then you can use a bullet point or a mind map. I use FreeMind and other, but you can look up more mind mapping software. It's basically a non-linear outlining method. Then you can also write the major kernels. You just write the major changes of the stories, and then you write the scenes that illustrate those changes, which would be your satellite scenes. You can also write down the characters' plans. Once the disruption is introduced, you write what are the characters' plans to resolve it, and the clashing plans then create the scenes. If you are writing a sketch, then you find the game of the scene. Once you find the first unusual thing, then you build off that disruption. Using the Del Close method from earlier, you ask if this is true, then what else is true, and then you build off of that, then you build off of that. And of course, pantsing. You just dive in and discover the changes and the scenes illustrating the changes yourself. Now this next one was brought up because somebody stopped me mid-con and asked me, well, what if they have an ending but don't have a beginning, or what if they have a beginning but they don't have an ending? Well, this is where chiastic structure comes in, if you'll forgive the suggestive diagram. Now, this is a form of story structure that is popular for fairy tales. A lot of structure in biblical narrative follows this, and Christopher Nolan uses it for his insane time-bendy plots. Basically, whatever happens in the first half, you mirror it across. So if you have something that happens at the 87% mark, you put it at the 12%. Something that happens at the 75% mark, you put it at the 25%. So if you have a scene here, you can put one over here, and so on and so forth. Let's see. So yeah, you can use this if you have a beginning half, but not an ending half, or if you have an ending half, but not a beginning, and then you link them by a midpoint. So that covers the meat of everything, the story and the story part of it. Now we get to the story world, which is the setting and characters, which is the ideal subject for Touhou because we were given such an amazing setting to make whatever we want with. So most Touhou Fanworks will use the same setting and characters. What you focus on will determine what you focus on will determine your unique take on it. Now, we got a bazillion different characters, but you gotta choose what you're gonna emphasize as far as their traits go. Now, you can determine their character traits using a number of models. You have the Ocean model, the Hexco model, the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, or the Jungian model, or the Four Humors, and you could use these models to pinpoint a trait and then come up with different interpretations of characters. You can have a ditzy, emotional Reimu. You can have a ruthless, dangerous, but also lighthearted Reimu. You can have a lazy Reimu. You can have the crimson slasher Reimu. which character trait you emphasize will determine how the character turns out. Now, this one got a lot more feedback than I thought it would. The semiotic square, also known as the mystic square, is a great way to come up with contrasting cast, locations, plots. It was developed by the semiotician A.J. Gramos to come up with basically 4 different sides, well, not just 4, but 8 different sides to an idea or a theme. All you gotta do is name a trait, name its opposite, name something that's neither, and then name its opposite, and then presto, you basically end up with 8 different categories to make different like traits out of. For example, what's the opposite of a no-nonsense shrine maiden? A plenty of nonsense magician. Want something that's neither of those? Well, we got a knave rookie but dedicated half goddess. And what's the opposite of that? A veteran AWOL gunslinging moon rabbit. Now, if we were to find something in common between these, well, these two, they are the power of nature versus the power of magic and technology. These two are more serious. These two are more goofy. And now we have basically a whole entire compendium of characters. We got our stage 1 and 2 bosses, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, all spanning the gambit of the different characters. Now, let's see. Is the chat still working? Hope it still is. Okay. So here's another tool you can use to round out your character cast, is the Actantia model, which... if you have a hard time coming up with, oh, who's my hero? Who's my villain? What if I don't know character archetypes? Well, characters can fit into one of 6 categories. The subject, that's your main character. Helpers, characters that help them, either directly or indirectly. Opponents, those that get in the way, even if they're trying to help them. The sender, whoever motivates them, it could be somebody like giving them direct orders, like say Remilia to Sakia or Yukari to Reimu, or it could even be somebody being blackmailed, and receiver who benefits from who benefits from the subject getting to the object. Now this could be whatever their objective is, or it could be a character representing the objective. Now, what about OCs? Well, in the past, I have been pretty... let's see. What does that say down there? I gotta see. Oh, sorry. I'm having a hard time reading this. Sunday P48 says, show us for that like you got here before you're done. You might want to rephrase that. Okay, so anyway, about OCs. Now, in the past, I've been pretty critical about OCs, but a lot of the advice that I was giving out was kind of typical of the fanfic community. But these days, I've kind of softened my stance on OCs, and I would like to clear up some of the myths that have kind of pervaded not just Touhou fanfic culture, but fanfic culture in general. And I say you can write OCs if you just remember these 3 myths. Number 1, the balance myth. This myth says that balancing a character is like if your story doesn't work, then you need to balance your OC. But I say balancing an OC will not save a bad story. There's no such thing as an overpowered or bad character. It's just a plot that doesn't work nor fit the character. The only thing you can balance is if they're realistic traits versus their unrealistic traits. And you can have unrealistic traits. That's what makes some original characters fun. Then you have the original flavor myth. You don't think the character is Touhou-like enough, and, that's the tough thing about doing it live. I stutter sometimes. I miss not stuttering. Okay, the original flavor myth. Don't think that making a Touhou-like character is the only way to make a character, nor should you shun outsider OCs. I got one word for you, Sumi Reiko. She put a nail in the, it has to be a native, or it has to be a yokai OC for it to work. AJ says, this is one of my favorite slides of the slideshow. I've struggled with making Touhou-flavored OCs myself, but knowing anything goes, and Sumi Reiko represent that is so empowering. Yep. And then finally, the nobody likes OCs myth. Well, tell that to Mituri, or Meimu, or Lai Mei Ling, which are kind of like clone versions of their characters, but yet they're still popular enough to take off. Or take the Elder Hakare Shrine Maiden, who starred in numerous fanworks. Or take the characters of The Last Comer or other fan games, or take the entire Lenin series. If you are not familiar with Lenin, Lenin isn't just a series about Touhou fan characters. It's a Touhou fan everything. It's its own. It's got a setting that's like a fan version of Gensokyo. It's got characters that are like all their own original thing. It's a sight to behold. It even has its own fandom unto itself. So it goes to show you, OCs can work. In fact, OCs can work so well, they can basically split off and make a neighboring fantasy realm. Now, building characters. This is how you build original characters or change canon ones. For example, you have Koakuma here, who is a mid-boss, but she only has an appearance. You have to provide the rest. So we got the appearance. How do they look and why do they look like that? That can also inform you a lot about their character. Sociology. How do they act in public versus how do they act in private? Psychology. You can use the previous previous models I showed you to determine that. You can also look at how do they who do they believe they are, the core self, versus what lies in their subconscious, if applicable, the hidden self. Not every character needs a hidden self. Sometimes all Reimu wants to do is hunt yokai and you don't need to dive into the character. But if you want to make a serious character study, then you can jump into the hidden self. Then we get to the actual balancing thing, what's known as mimesis versus synthesis, coined by rhetorical narratologist James Phelan. What are the realistic traits that make the character relatable, the mimesis, and what are the synthetic character traits that make them attractive? So again, realistic character traits make them relatable, synthetic traits make them attractive. If you ever wonder why a lot of main characters in YA novels tend to be so boring, it's because they're trying to make them relatable. And why are all the other characters so cool? It's because of the ridiculous traits. And also, welcome Vertlux in the chat. So if you make a character too relatable, they become boring, and too synthetic, they feel fake. That's the only level of balancing you need. The rest, you have to focus on your plot, or the story doesn't work. So that was the story part of the story and discourse. Now for the discourse. Structure is how you arrange a story and what goes into the telling, and the presentation is in what way the content is transmitted, physically, stylistically, and emotionally. Now we're at the 52-minute mark, so technically this is lasting longer than the original. I partly blame, I'm kind of going a little slower pace than the previous one, and plus I'm stuttering, so forgive me. So we got narrative, instance, time, and space. Instance is who's telling the story in what way. Wild and Horned Hermit's third person with a humorous narration, but many fanfics are in first person. This is your classic English class stuff. This is what, like, is the story in present tense, past tense, future tense? Is the character the narrator, or is it an external narrator? You get that idea. Then you got time and order. Are the events told in a strictly linear fashion, or are they told in flashbacks, flash forwards, and shuffled timelines? Now, this affects what's known as hermeneutics. According to the narratologist Roland Botts, the order the audience learns information creates what are called enigmas. These are the unanswered questions. And every time you answer an enigma, it changes the audience's experience of the story. When people tell you don't spoil the story, it's because spoilers alter a story's hermeneutics, which remove the enigmas, and that changes everything. Then you got space and duration. Are events summarized or shown in long, drawn-out detail? This example right here from Wild and Horned Hermit chapter 22, where the origins of the mysterious Manzai Raku are concealed until the very end of the chapter, creating an enigma, while all the scenes that show them doing tricks and stuff in their little sea show are only summarized in a few frames. You don't have to go into full explicit detail here. Then we got project length and continuity. You can make a one-shot, an individual work. This can be something as short as a sketch or as long as a fan game. Continuity is optional. Example here includes most MMD and Walfus comedy videos, but for a long example, Touhou Mother is a singular Touhou story, but it is several hours long. Episodic. This is a series of limited continuity tending to a status quo. This would be your M1 Grand Prix, maybe your Life of Maid, though I think I might have put that under serial episodic, but it's very, like, status quo-y. And then, of course, all your classic comedy dojins are very episodic. Then you got serial episodic, where there is additive or seasonal continuity. This would be your mainline Touhou games, the comics, and so on and so forth. Then finally you got the serials. a single story told over chapters or parts told over a long period. This would be Silent Sinner in Blue, which I discussed elsewhere, was kind of basically the mother of all Touhou comics. If you didn't like Silent Sinner in Blue, well, it walked so Wild and Worn Hermit and Forbidden Scrollery and Lotus Eaters and all the other comics could run. A big old chunk of the Western and Japanese fan series are also serials, and chances are you're probably planning one of these too. But if I may appeal to you for a moment for the shorter works, as tempting as it would be to make the Great Gensokyo novel or whatever, bigger doesn't always mean better. I, the creator of Diamond in the Rough, definitely know this. Shorts are easier to finish, and audiences only watch finished works, not planned ones. Short is accessible. The entry bar is lower for creators to create and audiences to watch. You can get practice with low stakes, and the audience doesn't need a massive time commitment to finish it. And most importantly, shorts can be memorable. Many of Touhou's most biggest memes spawn from short works. Like when I was at TouhouFest, I saw multiple people dancing on the DDR machines they had there to Marissa Stole the Precious Thing. That video was only 4 minutes long, but its impact has been decades. The same could be said for Cherno's perfect math class. It could be said for that single frame of the Hina face. The Yukiris were just a single frame, and yet it spawned an entire fandom unto itself, and so on and so forth. Other techniques that go into storytelling and relaying information include paratext, such as titles, chapter titles, subtitles, footnotes, covers, and even descriptions, which can add to a work's experience. References like parodies, homages, and pastiches, if you'll note the Overwatch spoof by Spotty Len here, or retelling the events of the games, like this example from Minus T. Relevancy. You can play with how explicit these story events are to the narrative, which we'll cover in a moment, but basically, you can have events in a story that have nothing to do with the narrative for red herrings, distractions, or gags. And of course, nested stories. You can have stories within stories. And how characters tell them can add to the experience of a work. So a little more on relevancy. How little story do you need? Now, previously I have quoted the saying, don't show the scene where nothing happens. But what exactly is nothing? Nowadays, I say don't show the scene that couldn't have happened. Now, for example, in the opening of Silent Sinner in Blue, we literally just have a couple frames of Raymond and Marissa sitting on the veranda, drinking tea while looking at animals and reminiscing. Now, you might think that this is a scene that could be cut, but not really, because there are different levels of relevancy to a story. First, you got the explicit scenes. It is directly tied to a story's events. Now, this is, of course, a scene where stuff happens, but that's not your only option. You have predictive scenes. It sets up explicit events and could be excised for time, but you don't have to. The peaceful orienting shot of Silent Sinner in Blue eventually ends on Reimu and Marissa wondering how long the peace will last before Yukari reveals that she's gearing up for a second lunar war. Then you got thematic scenes, scenes that tie into a story's ideas or theme, but are not tightly tied to the events. You can have persuasive scenes. They relate to the theme of the story a little more loosely, but if you cut them, it would kind of get rid of the experience of the full narrative. Now, then there's distractive and obstructive scenes. Distractive has nothing or little to do with the story events, and obstructive scenes actually actively get in the way of the telling. But you can use distractives for world building or gags. My favorite gag from one of the Waffles Christmas videos was when Chen was Tiny Tim, hopped out of a wheelchair, revealing, I can walk, before Yukari says, wait, Chen, you could always walk. Or obstructive scenes, scenes that directly get in the way of the telling. You could use this to mess with audience. If you have read the Kenma the Bear Yokai comics that I made at one point, where it will just cut away to Cherno, it says, meanwhile, then a long pause, the end. Even that can be used to create stories. Now we got presentation, the medium. Each medium has its own strength, weaknesses, and media language. This little graph right here is just a sample of what goes into different media. For example, what goes into cameras, shots, angles, movements. If you're using visual media, what's the setting? Iconography, expressions. If you're using audio, is it diegetic? Is it non-diegetic? Is it edited in? Is there a mood? And so on and so forth. You can look up all these yourself. But basically, the three forms of media you'll encounter are temporal, such as prose and audio works, spatial, art, and temporal spatial, comics and videos. And each one has their own set of codes. Again, written works use linguistic codes, works with audio then add audio codes, videos then add visual codes, and so on. Familiarize yourself with your medium of choice and then learn its codes. If you want to make stuff in a specific medium, but you don't want to pay for anything, well, I got some good news. There's some open source and freeware software. If you know where to look for it, you can find many of these on alternative2.net. They got free and open source alternatives to basically all the paid software. You get everything for writing, audio, video editing, animation, even stuff for making games. Basically, whatever you want to make, there's a free tool out there for it. Then we got style and tone. Style is the unique way that the thing is presented, and the tone is the emotional atmosphere of both the work itself and the presentation of that work. With reality, you can make something super realistic, like Touhou Bunshi, the fanfic that portrays Gensokyo in a rather realistic and dark matter, where the yokai are actually scary monsters and the humans can't even fly. Speculative realism, fantasy and sci-fi, Touhou fits in the speculative realism, where people can fly and go into aerial combat. Hyperrealism, which is where you have things like musicals and stylized reality, where characters can break out into song or get into comical injuries and not get injured. And absurdism, where we just throw out the rules of reality completely out the window. Then you got your adaptational level, which is canon. You try to follow Touhou as closely to the original works as possible. Mixed head canon, where you mix canon and fanon. Fanon, where you just go with whatever the fanon says is popular. And then finally, original head canon, where you ignore canon and fanon and just go with whatever you think would work. Then there's the tone. There's the work itself, the ideology. Now the content of the work can be optimistic, where the heroes win and everything's going fine. Or it can be pessimistic, where everything's horrible and everything just goes wrong. But then there's the way you portray it. You can portray dark things comedically or optimistic things seriously. It really depends on your taste. Now, tone and style is really what's going to set you apart. And you can capitalize on styles, like you can make the little mini musicals like Cool and Create, Iosis, and the like. You can embrace the absurdity of works by Aosagi or Bomber Grape. For example, we got Yukari dressed as Reimu, Reimu dressed as a giant panda, and Marissa dressed as a tire swing. And of course, again, you can have an optimistic heroic story portrayed in a serious manner, or such as, or at least the early episodes of, what's it called again? Memories of Phantasm. Or you can have a dark story portrayed in a lighthearted manner, like Osana Reimu, Koishi's Heartthrobbing Adventure, Something I Made. Okay. And then we got genre and theme. Genre focuses on what the story's about, and theme is the why. But themes don't have to be super complex to be or profound to work. You can just have something as simple as Touhou is fun, or Danmaku battles are dangerous. If you try to override a theme, it can come off as pretentious. It can suffocate the work. Example, well, again, Something I Made. The official Touhou comics tend to be mysteries, since they focus more on resolving problems than heart-pounding action, as Sherlock Cawson here illustrates. And here's a good list of the different genres and how they correlate to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This one comes from the fine folks at StoryGrid. Action tends to focus on the physiological needs, like survival, food, water, air. Now, crime, war, horror, Western and folk tales, and thrillers and mysteries fit under safety. This is where, again, like life, home, beliefs, all that stuff, and this is why Touhou tends to fit there, because it's safety versus survival. Now, genres of fantasy, sci-fi, and absurdity can fit under any of these categories, but they just complicate them. So if you write in different genres, how does fantasy affect survival? How does it affect safety? How does it affect love and relationships? And so on and so forth. And then the final thing to consider is your target audience. Are you going to be writing for a mainstream audience, even things that non-Touhou fans could enjoy, or something specifically for a corner of the Touhou fandom? Will you focus on canon, or are you going to focus on fanon? Are you going to write clean or explicit content? Explicit content might expand your options, but it'll also alienate certain age ranges and audience sensitivities. And is it going to be short and easy to complete for casual fans, or will it require a long, hardcore time commitment? So that covers the pre-production part, and now for the actual hardest part, and the thing that's actually kind of been helping me get through, I guess, running some of these panels lately, is the production stage. Actually making the thing. The hardest step, turning your ideas into works. Now, this is something I've recently discovered, and I seriously hope that this ends up becoming like a red letter day discovery for a lot of Touhou content creators out there. But basically, the hard science behind why production is hard. The first 3 steps, familiarize, brainstorm, and pre-production, all happen in the thinking parts of the brain. The neocortex, the last part of the brain that was developed as we developed as a species. Production, however, involves frustration, inadequacy, failure, and all sorts of other negative emotions that have built up over time, which are stored in the limbic system and fueled by the reptilian brain. It's stronger, it's faster, and most importantly, it is wordless. No amount of thoughts will get in the way of, we'll be able to convince the reptilian brain that it's wrong. In fact, there's an entire book, Thinking Fast and Slow, that covers why our reptilian brain is so much faster than our neocortex. But basically, all you got to know is that the planning parts of the brain are different from the doing parts of the brain, causing procrastination at best and cancel projects at worst. Which is why sometimes I worry if I'm not a very good role model for writing Touhou stuff, because although I can come up with ideas, executing them isn't my strong suit. But luckily, if I can help other people execute ideas, then this will all be worth it. So the why doing is slightly more important than planning. Audiences only watch finished works, not planned ones. Finished ones get more feedback and wider audiences than planned works that might have a limited beta audience. Get more experience finishing works than planning them to death. Just remember the Twilight principle. A finished bad work will always be more successful than an unfinished perfect work. There's even a couple books, Art and Fear and The Courage to Create, that cover that no idea will ever end up as good as what's in your head. The only thing that can improve your chances is to make more works. And at the end of the day, as much as people want to complain about the works they don't like, the creators still finish them. Like, as much as I usually feel like a hack or I'm not good enough, I'm still here, like, putting out stuff, so that has to account for something. So according to the procrastination researchers Timothy Pitchell, Neil Fiore, and Piers Steele, there are 5 major obstacles that get in the way of production. These are different from the ones that motivate people to write, in that they are more physically ingrained than psychologically ingrained. The first one is the lack of confidence. You don't think the work will be any good, so you don't finish, or you give up. The emotional solution here is to work through the urge to give up. No matter how much your body keeps telling you that it's not going to work out, you have to keep going. Now, the mental solution, the neocortex part of your brain, to ease that would be to have a supporting work environment and personal boundaries. And remember, competence grows confidence. The second obstacle is the lack of rewards, especially immediate rewards. Although you want to see the finished work, the production itself is frustrating, challenging, and not immediately rewarding. To use that classic meme, shows a guy in front of a huge crowd. Who wants to make a work? Everyone raises their hand. Who here actually wants to know? Who here wants to create a Touhou Project fic? Everyone raises their hands. Okay, who actually wants to work on a Touhou Project fic? Nobody raises their hands. So the emotional solution here is you have to work through the difficulty, the uncertainty, and the frustration. The mental solution, I accidentally wrote cognitive. Cognitive basically means mental. You focus on the process over the product. You make it into a game. You, I guess, get into that Zen mindset of focusing on all the little details of what goes into creating the work than actually wanting to finish it. And again, get into that flow state where the difficulty matches your experience level. Once they match, then it becomes relaxing. Major obstacle number 3, the lack of motivation. The work is boring and intimidating, and even when you find free time to work on your project, there are a million other things that you'd rather be doing. In fact, when I was working on this slideshow before I came up with this discovery, even when I had all the free time in the world, I would just go back into my living room and play Phantasy Star Online 2. But then I learned this, and then I had to work through the boredom and the tedium until it lessened and lessened until I was able to finish the slideshow. So again, you have to work through the negative emotion. The mental solution here, remove distractions, work in manageable chunks. Projects are made in tiny little bits, not all at once. But again, even when I removed all the distractions, I would just end up going for a walk until I remembered I had to work through the boredom and the tedium. Setbacks. Even if everything is going fine, everything from weather to equipment failure to unexpected drama, you are going to lose momentum. In fact, earlier tonight when I was having trouble setting up this stream, I was hit by this myself. But then I remembered the emotional solution, you have to work through the loss of momentum. And the cognitive solution is be prepared and remember Hofstadter's law. It will always take longer than you planned, even when you plan for it to take longer than you planned. And finally, one that seems to have resonated with a lot of people, perfectionism. Whether it's constant reassurance seeking, nonstop editing, or constantly changing your story after a new idea comes up, beware this twin cousin of lack of confidence. Because when you have perfectionist tendencies, it's because you don't think it's good enough and then you give up. The emotional solution, you might have noticed the pattern, is to work through the self-doubt. Each one of these, you have to work through the negative emotion. And the mental solution here is remember that not everything is going to turn out as perfectly as you plan. Again, going back to the courage to create and art and fear, it will never turn out as perfectly as you have it in your head. Each work will bring you more and more improvements. And then finally, publication, getting your work out there. According to the cultural critical theories, there are 4 basic criteria that determine your work. The production quality, was it well made for its medium and its style? The content quality, how is the story, genre, and subject treated? Now, because I'm no longer at an all-age venue, I can't say this. The quality that goes into a serious story is not the same that would go into a shit post. If you're shit posting, that will get you a different reception than if you're writing a serious story. So if you ever wondered why you can write something terrible just instantly and then get a million likes or hits or whatever, but then work on a serious story and then it gets completely passed over, that's part of what goes into it. And Genso Chronicle says, easy, just write everything perfectly the first time, /sarcasm. Okay, and target audience. Where your work is published and who is it made for? Marketing your work in the right place will account for most of your initial traffic. So if you're making animations and you publish on YouTube, that'll get you more hits than if you just privately link something in a chat or post on a forum to a private, I guess, hosting server for videos like they used to do back in the day. I remember back in my Gary's Mod days, we would just upload our stuff to PutFile, and then once we had YouTube, that was a game changer. And of course, make sure advertising matches the tone of the genre and work. Remember that you can't please everybody. Focus on a specific audience. If you're writing for a mainstream audience, you might piss off a niche audience, and if you're writing for a niche audience, then you might piss off mainstream audiences, and so on and so forth. Then finally, your author background. If you are a newcomer or established creator, that will be different than if you already have a track record. And also, what is your reputation as both a creator and as a person? If all 4 are in alignment, then your work will spread via word of mouth naturally. And then finally, you got your feedback and criticism. You can use this to improve your future works. Just remember the difference between actionable feedback and non-actionable feedback. Actionable is concrete, detailed, and lists accurate reasons why people liked or disliked, mostly from differing communities or backgrounds. If it's non-concrete, like I liked it or this sucks, then that's usually non-actionable. And most importantly, take some of your non-actionable feedback with a grain of salt. If you get lots of, oh, I like this or this sucks, then that could help, but context also plays into it. Let's see, misinterpretations is another form of non-actionable feedback where people see things that no other sane person would see. Comparisons, where somebody says, well, let me review this by comparing it to my ideas. Usually it's just a way for people to connect to others. Like, it's basically a way of saying, look, I'm a content creator too. Can we please be friends? Let's see, personal or character attacks that have nothing to do with the work in question. And then finally, overly enthusiastic positive or negative reactions from a single community. This can be either beta readers who cheer you on personally or haters who will collectively bash your work. Either way, it's best to get a wide variety of reactions from a wide variety of places. Now, let's see. Previously, if this was a live panel, we would have the Q&A time here, but let's see. We've already gone, I think, 25 minutes over the original time the panel ran, mostly because of stuttering and tiredness, but you could just ask me questions in the comments on the posted video or in the chat right now. But if you want to know more about the stuff that I covered here, I definitely recommend looking up the Living Handbook of Narratology. It's like TV tropes for narrative scholars. It covers the science of narrative, and it's free. It's available online. Just look up the Living Handbook of Narratology. The rest are hard to find, except maybe in bookstores. No, not bookstores, libraries. You can find these in libraries, especially college libraries, like Story and Discourse by Seymour Chapman, for which a lot of this was based. Introduction to Narratology by Meek Ball. Narratology, an Introduction by Wolf Schmidt. The Art of Comedy Writing and the Anatomy of Humor by Arthur Osberger. The Humor Code by Peter McGraw and Joel Warner. They're the ones that made that amazing TED Talk about benign violation theory. And also look up Roland Barthes, the guy who came up with Enigma codes and hermeneutics. Claude Bremen, who covered the different types of disruptions and narrative possibilities. Tsvetan Todorov, the equilibrium cycle. A.J. Gramos, the source of the semiotic square. And Gerard Genet, who had a lot to cover with narrative structure and techniques. So that is the re-recorded presentation of storytelling and sketch for Touhou Fanworks. Special thanks to Megapig 9001 and Jen Ray for pointers on this presentation and managing to get me through that 45 minutes version for TouhouCon. And thank you for bearing with me for the over an hour version of the re-recorded Encore. If you want to keep in touch, you can join Kane's Create and Writes, which is available through the Gap Discord. And if you aren't on the Gap Discord, it should be easy to find if you're on any Touhou-related Discord. Or you can just talk to me directly. I'm pretty easy to find. So I guess with that, go forth and create! And with that, I will see you all.